Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition is The Rocketeer, brought to us by Bandai. The Rocketeer is based on the 1991 film of the same name, starring Billy Campbell, Jennifer Connelly, Alan Arkin, and Timothy Dalton. While the game may be a pretty typical action platformer, it does have some nice cutscene, and overall follows the movie quite well. Of course, one of the things that makes the game unique is the use of the jetpack, of course, as the Rocketeer himself. And with the jetpack, you'll be able to fly over enemies and through different areas, as well as take some shortcuts because of it. So here we go with the Rocketeer for the NES. When you start up the game, you can either start a brand new game or go to the continue screen and put in a password that is given to you at the end of each chapter. There are 6 chapters in the game broken up into multiple levels apiece. After starting a new game, we get our first cutscene before we jump into the first level. So, after finding the jetpack that was once owned by Howard Hughes, Cliff straps it on and becomes the Rocketeer. Now in the Rocketeer, of course, playing as him, you don't get the ability to use the rocket all the time. You actually have to have fuel, and not every level will actually contain fuel for you to use the rocket. For example, the first level of the game, we're unable to do so. In the upper left corner is the current weapon we have equipped, which right now we have the fist. There are multiple different guns, shotgun, Uzi, grenades, as well as a rocket launcher to use throughout the game. Your ammo counter is above that, with each of the different guns using a different amount of the ammo in order to fire, with of course the rocket launcher taking the most amount of ammo in order to actually use. Your health bar is located below the actual weapon you have selected, represented by the red different dashes, and when you have fuel, there will be a gray dash bar right to the right of that red bar. Overall, the controls are rather simple, of having you being able to jump over enemies and use the attack button to either use your fist or whatever gun you currently have equipped. When you have fuel, you'll actually jump in the air and then press jump again at the height of your jump in order to use the rocket. You can't use the rocket when you've already started descending from your jump, so usually you want to just double tap the jump button in order to start actually blasting off. There are a few different enemy types that you will be battling in the game, for the most part the different Mafia members represented by the different colored suits that they have. Whether or not you have the purple guys who are always on one knee firing their gun at you, you have the guys in the red suits which will be standing, doing pretty much the same thing the purple guys do, the gray guys which will consistently try to run towards you, sometimes popping out of different doorways that are in the background. There's a few other enemies as well, including turrets that you will see against the wall, as well as these weird discs that you'll see, and after you get close to them, they'll hover in the air for just a second before exploding, sending a piece going both left and right. Other perils, such as fire, will also align different areas of levels, so you'll have to avoid that as well. The game is relatively generous with its item drops, with enemies dropping either fuel, ammo, or health on a regular basis, with also other health, weapon pickups, and other things scattered amongst the levels as well, which are always there. So memorizing those locations may help you out in case you get low on health. Knowing where the location of a particular heart piece may be able to save you just at the last second. While the graphics in the game are a little bit bland, overall I do like the soundtrack. Over here we grab our first fuel can, and this allows us to of course use the jetpack for the first time in the game. We're going to be able to blast all the way up to the top of this area before dropping all the way down here. From now on, in areas where you can get fuel, enemies will sometimes drop that fuel. In the next level, it's more of just a straightforward level of you actually at the airfield itself. Introduced here are a new enemy, the rocket guys, which only appear in levels that you also can fly around. What I usually like to do is equip the hand grenades and then use them to throw at the rocket pack guys. And there's a good chance when destroying one of the rocket pack guys, they will actually drop fuel to allow us to keep flying with the jetpack. And because of that, we're going to be able to fly all the way right through the level. And now it's time for the first boss battle, and there's only a couple of boss fights in the game. For this first one, there is a helicopter overhead throwing down bullets at you, which we'll have to dodge, and every so often dropping a guy. While defeating these guys isn't necessary to win the fight, you will get some bonus ammo or fuel that you will need in order to finish the fight, if you didn't have any going in. After a while of this fight, dodging the bullets and the guys, a target will actually appear on the front of the helicopter. What you're going to have to do is then fly up into the air and use the rocket launcher weapon in order to fire at that spot. Once you're able to hit it with 2 rockets, the helicopter will explode and you move on to Chapter 2. The first area of chapter number 2 is in a suburban-like setting as you're walking through various different houses. Another new enemy, the tank enemies, which are very low to the ground, so you'll have to duck in order to actually hit them, or you can throw a grenade from a farther distance. The grenades actually are probably one of the best weapons in the game, because they cover a large amount of distance, but don't require quite as much ammo as the rocket launcher, though they do about the same damage overall, taking out most normal enemies. The only time you're going to really use the rocket launcher is like we did just a little bit ago to take out the boss fights in the game. The second area of chapter number 2 has you in another city block, walking past a bunch of buildings, but you don't have the ability to use the rocket pack quite yet. It's just typical standard fare of enemies trying to keep your health up as much as you can as you're going through, and battling and jumping over those you don't want to even bother with. There's a few guys in windows throwing down some bombs from overhead, but you usually can move past them before they even get a launch of one of the bombs out of their hands. Though you will have to slow down sometimes. The third area and final area of chapter number 2 is more of the same. We're still unable to use the rocket pack during the course of this level, and it's kind of always funny doing these levels since you're still dressed up as the Rocketeer, even though you can't actually use the rocket. There's no fuel located in any of these levels. There's some turrets that are going to be set up along the sky area, so watch out for them as they're going to rain bullets down on you, with the biggest threat really being the guys in the red suits standing on a far end away from you, and when they get on screen, of course, they continually shoot out their machine gun-like fire. Using grenades from a distance is great on these guys, especially if you know they're coming up. If you want to conserve your ammo or are unsure and they catch you off guard, just try to jump in between their bullets in order to get by. At the end of the area though, there's no boss fight and we move already on to chapter 3. Chapter 3 has a relatively short intro to it, but thankfully also at the beginning of it, we finally get some fuel, and we'll be needing the fuel in order to get ourselves up into the skies and get to the rooftop areas of the stage. You're going to want to keep your overall fuel level relatively high during the course of this level. If you do run out, you're going to have to take out some normal guys in order to actually get some more fuel. There's a couple of areas in the level, like for example here, that you'll fall all the way down, but you won't be able to advance once you reach a building on the right side until you're able to get more fuel. And thankfully, there are guys that will spawn from the buildings in order to drop that fuel. On and over the rooftop, there are these different turret type things set up on the bottom, the purple ones launching missiles, while the red or orange ones firing up a purple ball that flies in the air and then goes back down. And you also have purple and gray satellites, with the gray ones being stationary and the purple ones moving up and down. They try to throw a good amount of stuff at you while you're in the sky, but since you move so quickly, as long as you have fuel, you'll be able to just blast right on by them. The second part of Chapter 3 is pretty much more of the same. While the background buildings are a little bit different, first off we're going to get some fuel and then immediately fly up into the sky as we'll run into kind of a wall on one of those buildings. Just weird the way the kind of perspective works on some of the buildings in this game, where some of them you can just walk on past and other ones you'll have to actually get up to the roof and go over. As you can see, there's a new type of turret just sitting on the edge of some of the buildings, and they'll consistently keep firing in kind of an arc pattern over it, but you can just, well, like we've done with most things, fly over it. Next up though, it's time for another boss fight. You immediately start by running into him. It's something that happens automatically. And then once it happens, you want to walk up close to him, stay about this distance, and then just keep on punching every time he walks towards you. Knock him back about 5 or 6 times and you'll move on to chapter number 4. While the previous chapters really didn't have much exploration at all, really not a whole lot of branching paths or dead ends, from chapter 4 onwards, while it's not really that difficult, there are a few times where there will be some different paths you can take. The first area that we're exploring is a lot of staircases, and because of the staircases, enemies will sometimes have an advantage over you, so you want to be careful when trying to go up these. Eventually we make it all the way over to the right side, and then we start heading up. There's a decent amount of ammo to be picked up along the way, as of course other enemies will be spawning, so anytime you see an opening in the background itself, you want to be ready and be sure to watch out for a guy who may end up spawning from these. Since I did a pretty good job of building up my ammo overall, I'm going to use a lot more grenades for the last few chapters of the game. Like I mentioned, knowing kind of the placement of the enemies multiple times that you play the game, you can throw those grenades from a good distance, then keep walking over to the left after you throw a grenade, and hopefully the grenade will run into one of those red-coated guys, and that'll definitely help you out, and you won't have to worry about jumping over their bullets or ducking under their bullets. Here on the staircases, just go one step at a time in order to get those weird discs to explode before attempting to go too far up and have them explode and being able to actually hit you. On the ones in this area, you do a slight jump beforehand, and it'll explode actually right underneath of you, and you won't even have to do anything to it. At the end of the hallway, after one of those purple suit guys, you move on to the second part of Chapter 4. It starts off immediately after a purple god with another staircase, and you're just going to keep following this path up. It looks pretty much identical to the area we had just previously explored. When you make it up here, you'll be in a kitchen type area. There's some fire as well as just the kind of normal placement of the enemies that we've already been dealing with. When you make it to the end here, you're going to be dropping down and go down another set of stairs in order to make it to the second level of the kitchen. It's a really big kitchen, kind of astonishing how exactly large this kitchen is in this building. But then you'll make it actually to the freezer. Now here is where there's a bunch of different areas, and if you don't go up the right paths, you'll end up running into a dead end and have to do some backtracking. You want to wait till you get to this set of ice cubes and then jump up. Avoid the fire on that right side, instead just immediately jump up the next set of ice, and then run off this platform with a jump, as you won't be able to reach that platform from the one below it. Then, some more ice, and jump up to here where you'll make a big leap over to the left side, and be able to get to the top platform, which will allow us to get out of this area. Make sure that you jump up to this platform so you only have to deal with one of the red guys, and you don't have to deal with the two and the fire that's on the platform just down below. At the end of the area, you have a brief cutscene before the next part of Chapter 4. This area has you in the dining room-like area. It's quite a large dining room, but the good thing is we actually are able to use our rocket pack. We're going to start off by blasting into the sky after getting some of that fuel, and then use our grenades to try to throw at the guys who are going to be using their jetpacks to run into us. The strategy for this area, just like many of the others, is pretty much use your grenades as much as you can, or whatever ammo you're preferring to take out these guys, and just hope for the best as far as their item drops go. There actually is a good amount of health items spread along the actual scaffolding, so you want to make sure that you fly pretty high up into the areas so you can grab that extra health. At the end of the area, grab the purple fuel can and you'll blast through the roof. Chapter number 5 has us back in the airplane hangar, and because of this, it looks pretty much identical to the first chapter of the game as far as just the background images, but the color scheme is different. I'm going to switch back to the fist item for a little bit now to try to rebuild up my ammo count since I used a lot of ammo in the previous levels. Work your way up to this long hallway and then run across. There will be a couple of gray suit guys that will try to come up, and you want to start working your way back over to the left and then climbing up a set of different platforms. Be sure to grab the fuel at the end here, and then you can use the rocket to blast yourself up into the air and fly over the next few platforms. Grab some health in the upper left corner if you do need it here, and then run along this platform. It's hard to actually use the rocket pack here because you'll end up just hitting the ground itself or the ceiling and bouncing right back down to the ground, negating the rocket altogether. Fall down a series of platforms, hugging mainly the left side that you can actually fall all the way back down to the very bottom of the area. Once on the bottom of the area, just head right. You don't have to really worry about the other platforms that are spread along here. Take out the few guys, jump over some fire, and try to conserve some of the health. You know you're near the end of the area when you see one of those red-coated guys, and then you'll be out of the airplane hangar. Once outside, you're now going to be in a forest area, which is pretty different looking than the other areas we've explored. There's also a new enemy to fight, the Bat Enemy. What great NES title wouldn't be complete without bats? These bats will usually fly overhead and then drop down to whatever level you're currently on, and then fly towards you. Thankfully, they can easily be taken out with a single punch right to the face, in which case they aren't too annoying to deal with as opposed to enemies bats in other games. You want to use the rocket pack in order to fly up and get up to this platform. The fuel is a little bit of a premium throughout here, as you'll have to pretty much get lucky to get fuel from the different enemy drops, as there isn't much scattered amongst the actual ground levels. Over here, when you get to this mountain type area, you want to start jumping up the platforms. You can grab the health if you need it, as well as some ammo before eventually you make it to a straight moving platform. It's an extremely weird setup when you just kind of would think realistically how this forest would be set up. But either way, once we're up to here, just want to head over to the right, watching out for more bats and the guys in the gray suits before climbing up another set of mountains. This is why the fuel definitely comes in handy, as you can just blast your way all the way up to the top without having to worry about doing a little bit of platforming. But thankfully the jumping in the game is relatively responsive, so you don't have to worry too much about jumps missing. In the second area of the forest, you will now have branches on the trees that when you walk underneath them, they'll shake a little bit and then actually drop down on you. With the fuel that we have, we're going to blast up to the top area and land on this platform. Lots more branches are going to try to fall on you, as well as just the typical enemies. We're going to do the same thing that we just did in the previous area. When we make it to the Rocky Mountain type area, you want to climb and jump up all the platforms to make it up to the top, and then you're going to head along this platform. You'll eventually start seeing random parking lots set up amongst the actual mountain itself. Just keep on heading to the right, grabbing fuel if you want to from the different guys, and you can fly a little bit through this area, but with the low-lying trees you just end up bouncing your head off of them and end up landing back down on the platform. When you make it to the mountain, use the fuel that we have gathered a little bit to fly up in order to try to make it up here. And you'll see some more of the parking lot set up. At the end of the parking lot is a brief cutscene before the next boss fight. As long as you have fuel, this is an extremely easy fight. You want to use the rocket fuel, fly up into the air, and then launch a missile at each of the cannons along the building itself, in which case you complete Chapter 5 and move on to Chapter 6, the final chapter of the game. There are gray-suited enemies that will run at you during that boss fight, so you can take them out to get more ammo or rocket fuel. The first area of Chapter 6 is the only area in the entire game that is much more of a maze than others, with actually a goal that you have to accomplish before you're able to complete the stage. You'll notice there's a lot of electricity running throughout different areas, blocking many of the pathways that you can take. You want to work your way around and end up dropping all the way down to the ground level. Now actually this is where we would want to go and go all the way over to the right to complete the area, but because of an electricity field set up, we can't do that. So what we have to do is find a radar dish that is actually controlling the electricity fields and take that out before we're going to be able to continue. Run over to the right and get to this box and jump up a couple of platforms. Once up here, all the way to that top, eventually you'll get to an area where you can go back over to the left and jump up, well, even more boxes. There's a bunch of guys in red suits lying in the areas of this place, so you want to be careful of those. Jump over their bullets onto the box and then up to the next level. When you make it up here, take out this guy and then drop straight on down. Here you'll find the radar dish, in which case you're going to have to attack it multiple different times in order to destroy it. Once you see the little explosion, you know that's been taken care of. Watch out for the rotating turret, as well as plenty of those red coat guys, and then head up here. When you make it back to the very top of the area, just run over to the left, grab some extra ammo, and then drop all the way down. Now, make your way back through the area, and instead of going the path that we took exactly last time, we drop down to this level and head over to the right. Here's the box that we used to climb up just a little bit before, and over to the right is no longer that electricity field, and we can just keep on running to the right until we make it to the next screen. Thankfully, there's some extra ammo as well as health to help us out before we make it to the next area. In this place, you have some gears that are set up, and of course you don't want to actually land on the gears themselves because you will get a little bit of damage done to you. There's also some fire and of course other enemies firing at you while you're running through this. At any point you want to make your way up to the top level. When you make it off to the very end, and I'm going to switch back to the grenades to help me out take out some guys, you want to use the box in order to start climbing up. You're going to have plenty of gray suit guys running at you, falling on you, and coming from pretty much every direction. When you make it up here, you want to jump along all these giant boxes, watching out for tanks and stuff, and then run all the way over to the left, jumping over this fire. And in this whole area, we're going to climb up some boxes. You'll have to make some relatively large jumps throughout the area, and since we can't use the rocket pack, these are a little bit of a pain. But since the jumping works pretty well, I don't usually have any trouble with accidentally falling down. Once you make it over here, you want to actually keep jumping over to the right. There's a few different enemies that will fall on you, as well as those exploding things. Watch out for this tank, and then run underneath here in order to go to the last area of the stage. Inside this area of the actual giant Zeppelin, you're going to start off with some openings in the background with plenty of guys trying to spawn from them. Since we're really close to the actual boss fight, you want to try to conserve your health. There's lots of fire going on throughout this area, and the fire is a little bit taller than some of the other fire that's been sitting along most of the platforms. So because of this, you'll have to be careful with your jumping. You also want to make sure that you have at least some ammo left. You're going to be mainly using just your pistol in order to take out the boss. This area, thankfully, is relatively straightforward. You want to drop down here and then run over to the right, and eventually we're going to drop down into a hole before the actual final boss fight begins. You want to have the grenades equipped before entering the boss fight, and mash the attack button once the boss fight begins. If you do this correctly, you can throw a grenade. However, during the boss fight, you're only going to be able to use the pistol. But with the right timing, you can throw a grenade at the very beginning. Then run over to the right and just keep mashing the fire button until the boss runs off the edge and you've completed the game. You can now sit back and enjoy the ending to the Rocketeer for NES. So there you have the Rocketeer for the NES. There were a few other different versions of the Rocketeer made, including for the Super Nintendo. Overall, the NES version is relative typical 8-bit affair. However, it follows the movie relatively well, the game is responsive, and there is some cool stuff with the multiple different weapons, as well as of course the levels that you're able to use the jetpack on your back to help you fly through. And while I do find some of the backgrounds and colors a little bit bland, the music helps make up for that. So overall, a pretty good film adaptation turned into an NES game. After the credits roll, we get to see the scene of them kissing once again, and it says, "Congratulations, you're a first-rate Rocketeer." You can then stay on that screen and reset the game and start the thing all over again. But with that, it's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.